Hey guys, this is a release video for a pretty big release that's going out today if you're a Patreon of mine. So we're just doing a flyover of stuff from everything from bookcases to some community generated stuff, some really dynamic content, stuff that Zephyr's been able to put together from a lot of these. You're looking at new castle options and tons of new things. Here we've got a bunch of Class 1 building expansion. We're going to be going through these in detail. Lots of new pieces that you can stack and spin around and put together and build side by side, build some really cool and advanced sort of maps. We're also going to talk about a couple of new modules today. I'm going to timestamp those so you can jump straight to them. But this is going to be a big release, so you might want to put this video on 1.5 times speed and kind of move through it and hear everything that's available because it's pretty considerable. And there's also a bunch of assets that have been updated, simplified, made more dynamic. And you guys will have a lot of fun with this. There's not only a city expansion with the Class 1 buildings and all of the community stuff, there's also this modular wilderness expansion, which is going to give you quite a bit more to play with in terms of new assets. There's also a bunch of new scenes that have been built with a lot of these new assets and new capabilities. So those are deployed so that you can unpack those and pull them apart and see how they've been built. New ways to build cities and alleyways and big or small wilderness maps, and so you name it. There's a bunch of stuff that you can now do with this new release. So with that, let's jump into it. So the way my content works is pretty easy. It's just $7 for everything. It's crazy, I know, and it's not always going to be that way, but the only thing that's different is if you want all of my archive of my Dungeon Draft files, then that's $12. But otherwise, for most people, $7 a month is it. You get the entire modular system. You get all my premium maps. If you leave, you keep everything. You just don't get updates. So, again, this won't always be the case, but right now it's probably the best deal in the VTT world. To get it, you just go to my Patreon. So patreon.com/Baileywiki, which is linked in the video notes. The pinned post at the top of my Patreon has all the links that you need. Where you really want to get to is these two documents. The first is my FAQ and installation guide. It's got everything you need, including Patreon links, how to install my modules, info on other modules that you'll want to install, and all kinds of FAQ and tips for using my content. The second document is my modular system guide. It's got everything you need to know about my modular system specifically. What's in it, how to install it, how to use it. It's even got the entire changelog and release history for the entire system with video walkthroughs for everything. So if you're curious about this content, go find those. They're public documents. You can open them up. I'll link to them in the video notes as well, and you can check it out for yourself. So first thing to show you, this is actually in the premium module. I created this bookshelf scene, and then I created these bookshelves, or these books that fit into the shelf. So these are all tiles. And I built these for Pyram King. So these are all book spines in his adventures that he publishes. But for you, if you pick this up, if you don't want these particular titles, you can double click on it and you can see an entirely untitled section, and you can select the book that you want without the title on it, just to replace those. There's actually more colors and things like that. You can see these images along the left of these different books that are available to you. So yeah, you can add the titles directly in Foundry, or if you want it to look a little bit better, you can also pick up the Dungeon Draft files through my Patreon, and you can make even more customized books and even change these titles the way that you see them here. What I also did, just to make this just a little bit more Baileywiki interesting, is I introduced this little piece here, and this is controllable by any player. You may have to make sure that it's got the right permissions when you finally import it, but essentially any player can control this. And when they select it and then click on a book, the book, it has a little, you probably couldn't hear the audio, but it plays a little page turning sound, and then it opens up a journal entry. Now you're going to have to make this journal entry whatever you want, but this uses active tiles. So if I click on one of these books just with my tile picker, And by the way, I'm using the DF Architect module, and I'll show you some other things later today probably, but it's what creates this nice little image here. But if I, using Monk Active Tiles, if I go into the triggers, you can see I've preset it to not only call up this sound, which is in the module folders itself, so it should automatically work, but then I've automatically created this as well. So you want to open an entity sheet, and instead of the one that I've got in here, you want to figure out, which thing do you want your players to actually open, and then you'll hit this little sign here and select the entity, and it will open them. It'll open that entity then with that book. And so you can have only one book on the shelf, and then over time you can add more and more books, all from the files that you saw in there. So up to you guys if you want to use this, but I thought it was pretty fun.
Also in this month's release are our contest winners, Idiot Wizard with the Cursed Sepulchre, Tax Collector's Office, and Jester's Quarters, and Ella's Rita with the Grotto in 2 versions. We've also included Shafto, who submitted Mazes and Classrooms in Exhibition as a previous winner of the contest. Idiot Wizard's rooms consist of the Cursed Sepulchre, which has this beautiful overhead tile that you can use on any other 6x6 octagon room in the castles to have this cool shadow effect. The Tax Collector's Office has a lot of great details and is a perfect addition to any castle with a treasury. And the Jester's Quarters tells a lot of stories with some really great detail. As we've been using multi-face tiles in this release, I've also included alternate versions for the floors in here. If you use Quick Edit mode, you can cycle between a restored and the actual cursed version of the Sepulchre. You can also switch these tiles manually, and there's a ruined version for the Tax Collector's Office. Moving over to Ella's Rita's Grotto, this is easily one of the most complicated levels-enabled prefabs that we have to date. It consists of a total of 6 different levels, with a macro to provide swimming sounds and elevators to power the swimming effect within all of the levels. You can see there's a lot of attention to detail in Ella's Rita's tiles, and we worked really hard to do them justice with this level setup and this prefab. For Shafto's work, he submitted a variety of mazes. We have a walled version and a hedge maze version that includes walls for being within a specific compound or without. These are also enabled with multi-face tiles that allow you to switch between a clean and dirty version of the ground that includes leaves, and also swapping between a more orange or autumn themed hedge versus a vibrant green hedge. And this applies to both of those. Shafto also submitted this incredible entry hall that has a balcony. The lighting looks a little strange as a GM because of the levels previews, but it also features multi-face tiles to switch between ruined and pristine versions, and it looks beautiful in any castle. Finally, Shafto has included his variety of classrooms that feature a dedicated bedroom for each member of your party, with all of the major 5e classes represented. To show off these pieces in action, we've created Knoll Spine Keep. This features Shafto's entry hall as the main way into the castle, and you can see the levels enabled balcony works great. And this takes us up to the second floor, which includes some of the classrooms also by Shafto, and some of the other castle pieces such as the closets and bedrooms. From the exterior, a cave leads into Ella's Rita's Grotto, an alternative way to get into the castle. Here, you can listen to the sounds of water dripping down into the cave as a waterfall flows down into the pool. Elevators from levels power the ability for players to swim up and down from all of the 6 levels. As you can see, there's a lot to explore within this. Ella's Rita has made several different passageways that can be easy to get lost in for someone who's not familiar with the space. And the purple glow from the crystals adds a really nice ambiance as players explore. At different points at the top level, players can discover ladders that will lead up into the castle basement. Not all of these areas are already populated with teleports, so if you want to adjust the castle you can, or you can add loot in these spots if you want to encourage players to explore even more. Climbing up the ladder puts the player in the basement behind a secret passage in a hallway. Here in the basement we see more rooms, such as Idiot Wizard's beautiful Jester's Quarters, Abominable Rob's Pantry from the Gothic Castle series, a restored version of the wine cellar, and other rooms, like the tax collector's office, and a few other classrooms that we won't show in the video just yet, but are around here. If someone makes their way back down the hallway, there's another secret door to be found that leads through a clearly decrepit hallway and to the Cursed Sepulchre. This is a great way to tie in a room that otherwise wouldn't fit a functioning castle. To break the castle down, floor by floor, on the first level we have the cave to the grotto and the entrance hall, which leads up to the second floor. This is where players will need to access the rest of the rooms. If players go up to the second floor and come back down, there are additional classrooms, a smithy, and library. Up on the second floor, we have some of the classrooms again from Shafto, and ways to access the rest of the castle. The third floor holds 5 more classrooms, and if we go back down to the basement level 2, we can see Eldasrida's Grotto and all 6 of its levels. And we can see the places where it reaches up into the basement, in the pantry, and the secret passageway. There's also a great hall and more classrooms.
Now let's look at the major items in the release. So this is kind of one scene of items, and then we have another one for the wilderness portion of the release. So in here you will find new assets for the modular class 1 building system. So in this one, I put more sort of thematic in different sort of spaces in here so that you can do some different things with your storytelling. Here's just a general apartment, and then next door is this apartment that's got this really odd, pit to hell or another dimension or something like that. It's got this, just a very different sort of sinister sort of sleeping arrangements. So who could be in here? You don't know. You can always lock the door to this room, but if you ever want to introduce something like that, this makes it easy to do that. Here's a relatively large apartment, maybe even big enough that you could have an encounter or a battle in here. This is a rooftop, meant to be a rooftop. It could also be just connected to a building greenhouse. So relatively simple, but you can put a staircase right here, and you can put this on top of a C1 building. This is to help build out spaces like Waterdeep, and you wanted to start building out all the buildings. I've got a lot of components that can go into that. And I will be doing more of a semi-official Waterdeep sort of expansion here in a little bit. I've also got what I call the Great Hall. These are just different hall pieces that can interconnect. You can use one or both. You can flip these together and make a giant circle in the middle. This is for if you want to have relatively large open spaces, maybe for government buildings, things like that. And we'll look at an example of it. Also have these the modular library. So this is kind of the main area of the library. But then this is more of a maze area with some, like a locked cabinet, maybe with some magical books that you might find there. You've got other sort of formats of the library as well. This one actually has sort of some creative walling where you can walk up onto the bookshelves and sort of walk around. These are all meant to be able to, rotate and put together in different ways so that you can have different kinds of libraries in your world, and you can even bolt in different types of things onto those libraries. I couldn't help myself with the bowling alley. This is a bowling alley that you can bolt into any of your taverns. So this is sort of open walled so that you can, again, just slide it around, connect it to taverns in different ways. I'm sure somebody will come up with a really cool way to do a working bowling game here using this map or a derivative of it. There are some new tiles I've introduced before I go on to the rest of the class 1 building types. There is this, now instead of just wood, you can use a stone staircase up, down, and then both directions. I've also added different types of chimneys. Remember, if you want to get to any of these and see where they're at, that's why I create these, is so you can double click on it and see the path to get to this particular object, or click on here and you can see what else is in the folder where these things are located. So here's like all the stairs in this folder, for example. And likewise, if you want to find out where these chimneys are, you can find their path here. You can also use Mullin-Net, of course, to do it. If I click into here, I notice all my other chimneys and some other things that are essentially called fixtures. And with a new tool that I'll show you with DF Architect, you can actually merge these into your roof tiles when and if you want to. I also created a double door because some of you, like me, were tired of putting together two single doors. So you've got a double door. It's in the same path as all of the other doors and portals and staircase entrances, but you can really quickly change it to a double window and vice versa if you've got that. Another big thing is the balcony system. So I've introduced these balconies that can be put in like overhead tiles and bolted on to other maps. I'll show you how those work in a second. If you go in here, you can find all the other balcony objects. And I made these modular. Here you go. So you can create the balconies kind of any way you want with the modular system. And I'll show you examples of these used later, and you have both stone and wood types. This is just to make more tactically interesting maps. I also introduced a sign that you can put onto any of your shops. I'll show you examples how I use it. And then this is actually a prefab. It's a lantern here in your actors. And it's meant to go sort of embedded into the wall in front of a shop. So you can add lighting really quickly and easily outside of a shop. And it's set up as an overhead tile. So when the lights are down, it occludes the light really nicely and looks good in the dark. Going on to more of our modular pieces, I created a new series called Meeting Rooms. And these are rooms that can be used either above a particular floor or connected to, something like this. And they're just meant to be just like the kitchens, sort of interesting spaces where you can have some thematic things going on, right? So here's an iron and stone room. Here's a room that has this interesting hole sort of, in the floor, and down below is something else. You could put a teleport to another map there, for example. Here's a relatively opulent room with nice, stone fixtures, things like that. This is to have a little bit more space, maybe add some more NPCs. And this room has something bad's going on here. There's something's being kept in this cage, or you could cover this cage with a table or other things from Tom Kartos or Forgotten Adventures. Forgotten Adventures has a really great top to go on this. So if you want to just drop on a cage top, make it an overhead tile, put a creature inside of it, you could do that as well. This is really modeled after some of the other Waterdeep stuff. You'll find a Fire Genasi is running a sort of an indoor smithy. And so this is a shop that would kind of go and play into that as well. There's some egress points and other things where you can bolt onto the side of this or above it. You can put apartments. Like this is set up where you can put a staircase right over these tiles and really start building vertically instead of sort of horizontally. And there's some more Tavern, specifically in rooms. These are a lot dirtier and a lot messier. I wanted to go for some like really low end kind of grimy rooms that could go, play into that kind of theme. So you've got this sort of bunk bed room with a little meeting table here, a little bit nicer room sort of connected to it. You've got this really just terrible room. If you want to put your players into something that's just dirty, these are just, basically hay and, and some blankets. And then this room is just full of, hammocks and whatnot. But just good thematically for anything. This could end up being a, smuggler's den or a thieves guild or something like that. And then just to give you more variety, some more rooms here that you can use that just look a little bit different than the ones that you saw before. This one's got, for some inexplicable reason, a bunch of weapons here. Maybe somebody's using this room to sort of fence goods or sell weapons. And then you've got this room here that your players may stay in, and God help them if they find the bathroom, because it is it's an utter tragic mess. So just some things that you may find funny or fun to surprise your characters with there. Now you're probably wondering what all this stuff is in the middle. Because I am using Monk's Active Tiles now, I thought it'd be really great to give you guys some tiles that sort of mean things. And you can see again where these tiles all get stored. They're all in, this path here.
but you can use them to drop into a scene, you know, make the tile either visible or invisible, depending on if you're interacting with it or not. And then you can have it set off, you know, events. You can have it be a staircase leading you to other places. Maybe you're using it to teleport. Maybe you're literally making a teleporter. You know, maybe it's just a hey wait type of scenario where you just want them to stop or something happens when they walk over a particular area. Maybe you're doing a trap. These are all just for you to sort of lay out how you want and then create the automation that you want to. I did also include some traps that are now enabled by the active tiles. So anytime you look for active, you'll probably find anything that's set up with active tiles. This trap here does a whole bunch of stuff. When you walk over this, there's quite a few things that happen to sort of launch a bunch of stuff. There's actually a giant animated tile here. And when you place this prefab, you actually have to go in here because right now, until this becomes possible, you have to actually establish these references specifically. So if I drop this prefab into another scene, it would still have all of these object references and I would have to change them to be referencing the right thing. So start the animation on this tile where it's referring to this tile here, which you can't see because it's not being animated. But you want to select that tile, update it, and then it'll update here. And you can see there's other references to like an ambient light, right? So there's an ambient light here. And then you want to, it does things like shutting off the tile and things like that. So let me just show you what happens when a player walks over it. I don't know if you can hear the audio, but there's a sound of the flamethrower. There's a light that flashes. If it was dark, you would see all of a sudden it brightens, and then you know, it hits the user. Now, there's some ways to automate damage and other things, but I didn't try to automate that here. I thought it was too much automation to put into something that you might need to be a little bit more flexible than that. And then I also created these two different teleporters. So these teleporters are also in the premium. Most of the stuff here is in the towns module, but premium has these two teleporters. And it's just got some fun stuff. You do need token magic effects. If I walk into it, it will blur my player and then I just have them teleporting here. Of course, when you drop your teleporter into your game, you're going to want to go over here, click on it and see how the triggers are set up. There's nothing that you have to re-reference. But if you leave it just the way it is here, you will have to have, make sure that you've got your macros being called correctly. You probably will have to change this to the blur macro. Maybe if you have a different number, if you're using token magic effects. Let me know if you guys have any problems with this. I can kind of give you some guidance on my Discord. But you know, it plays a sound that's already within the module. And then of course, this macro will need to be the right macro too. So if you change the names of your default token magic effects filters, you'll have to make sure that you pick the right one here. But what this does is it just removes that filter effect after about 3 seconds. And of course you need to decide where you want it to teleport to. In this case, I just had it teleport here, but you could go entirely to a different scene and a different location, and it will recode the teleporter to send you there. So check out my upcoming tutorial on active tiles if you get confused or don't know how to work this stuff. Another thing that's changed with this is more of a change than anything else, these two things here. Now all of the buildings are just the same type. There's no more concept of a desert or snowy building. There's just all the buildings now are C1, C2, C3. You'll notice instead of the roofs, now you can see the interiors of the building. So for those of you who really kind of want to see what it is before you deploy it. And then all of the buildings now, you notice I'm on my roofs layer and I come over here and I didn't have to turn on quick edit mode. I unlocked all of the roofs so that you can just place the prefab and start manipulating the roof. I did that for two reasons. One, roofs tend to be the first thing that people want to manipulate, but also if you right click it, if you have this new module installed called Multiface Tiles, and you right click a tile, you can see that I've added different roofs to this asset. So now instead of having to find one, I can just really quickly drop one in and either change it to snowy or a desert roof or the normal one. And I'll start using this in some other things as well. So keep an eye out for some of this functionality. It's not required. You can always just double click on this, see its name, 2041A, and then you can come in here and type in 2041 and you can see some of these alternative roofs here. And you can pick those and it'll replace the tile with those. Another thing that I changed, my fort, city, and wall systems have all been updated, and specifically they've been updated to use levels, which I think is a lot more elegant use for them, makes them a lot more effective. But the gates specifically, I have now made it so that you can actually walk under the gates. So if I turn on my quick edit mode, I can see that this is really a tile that disappears. This is a tile that's always persistently up. And then I've got another tile underneath. And then there's also a gate here, and there's walls up top versus below. So it's really effective in bringing a player through that. If you have the ambient doors module and you walk up to this, I don't know if you can hear my audio, but I just opened up the gate. I no longer did the animated gates. Maybe I'll add those back later, but this was just a much easier and simpler way to do this. And notice it's got levels hooked up with the staircase there. So now I'm up on my wall and I can walk around on my wall and I can go back down again. And I can come back in here and close my gates. And so really the GM can have control of this if you lock it. You can give players control just by unlocking it. So it's just a much easier, simpler solution than what I had before. Next up, this is a new asset. This is the fountain. If I zoom in here, I don't know if you can see the shimmering water, but this is actually made with a few different pieces. So if I go to my tile picker, this top piece is its own piece. And then I've got this water piece that's animated all by itself. And then I've got this sort of background piece. So you can do some cool stuff with this if you know how to manipulate these things to put things in the water and things like that. I don't have any splashing sound. I could add that, but I just wanted to keep the complexity of this down a little bit. But this is an asset that you can find just by searching for fountain. And if you ever want to resize this asset, there's a fountain noise, by the way, that gets progressively louder as you get close to it. If you want to resize it, you can do that here by saying like 0.5. And give yourself a smaller size or even a larger sized fountain if you like that. Almost done with this part of the release. I also have introduced awnings. These are color neutral awnings. You can find their path by clicking on them like anything else. You can see all the awning types in there. They're color neutral so that you can give them any color that you want. So if I want a red awning, I've got a red awning. And then this would go right up against a building, probably over the door, over the windows, just to help you get more interesting looking buildings. And of course, you can do these things like having players land on them and other fun stuff, but have fun with those. I also introduced the concept of subroofs and subwalls. These are smaller walls. What I wanted to do is I have all these really great castle assets. I've got bathrooms and closets and bedrooms and even oubliettes and destroyed rooms and other things. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to be able to use all of these in this system? And so I created these sub walls to sort of encase some of these rooms with something that looks more like a building wall. And then I created sub roofs that you can put over top of these. So I could, for example, put a bedroom on the back of this and maybe a bathroom right next to it on the back of this shop here. And I might encase them in these sub walls, and then I might put the sub roof over all of them. And just like my other roofs, these roofs are all colorable, right? So you can make this, make this a green roof and it can match the rest of your building. So that's how these assets work. And this is the expansion to the modular wilderness. This may seem mundane, but it's really important. With modular wildernesses, it's hard to make terrain. So I went and made a bunch of pre-built terrains, things that you would use in a ready-made battle map, right? So this is the a sort of a curved path. Here's a path that goes in a fork. Here's a four-way intersection. Here's a switchback. Here's just a single path kind of going through the woods, if you will. You've got this, what I call an enclave. You've got a hole. You've got some mountains that can go on the edge of the thing. I'm going to show you examples of all these. And then you've got a river that can run through everything. Relatively simple, but very, very flexible and very powerful. You can throw these into a map, rotate them around. You can resize them considerably, right? So by the way, I'm using a module called QuickScaler, I believe, that lets me just use my bracket keys to resize things very, very quickly and easily. But because you can resize these very big or very small, you can make lots of different kinds of maps. And you see how the edges are feathered. They come together really easily and can, very quickly, make it look like, now there's this, path kind of leading off in this direction. And you can really just mix and match these in very, very quick and very flexible ways to make good maps. Of course, you can layer in all of the trees and other things on top of them and take what looks like a relatively sort of dull landscape and put lots and lots of things on top of it. You can even put things like mountains at the edge here, and all of a sudden you've got a battle happening at the side of a cliff or at the side of a mountain where you didn't before. I also introduced what I call tree lines. These are just come in different sizes. You can find them in the Actors prefab portfolio. And what they are is they're like trees, but they're for covering large spaces. So instead of having to spam your map with tons of trees, you can drop in, one of these. There's just a bunch of dead trees. And underneath is the shadow for those trees. And it's, you see all the trunks and things like that. And the walls are just terrain walls that stretch very far. And so this is helpful when you want to build maps without having to spam trees everywhere, but you want to control where users go or maybe the shape of the map. That's what these are for. And they're really attractive looking. Here's, like just these trees, and the canopies are just really good and a cool detail. And of course they occlude if you walk under them. These don't occlude. The player can walk under the branches and you can sort of get hidden in the branches. It's kind of a cool effect. These are just smaller versions of what you just saw. These are huge. And if you build huge maps, these will give you a hit on performance. These will be really easy to work with. And then of course you make these larger or smaller, and we'll go through some examples of these here in just a second. Here's one of the new scenes. This is all built with modular pieces. You can move these around, check out the scene, double click on them, find out where they're at, so you can build more of them or just use, what they're called and use Molinet to find them later. Just gives you some ideas of how you can piece things together to make, really interesting scenes, right? I mean, I've got signs and benches out here. I've showed you an example of how you can take one of those, modular rooms and just bolt it in here. This is like the gardener's room that's kind of accessible from this garden here. This is also another castle asset that I'm using in mixing and matching here with this asset. If you see some of the new roof options, you can see how some of these things are set up where I just added a trap door. You can see how I've used the balcony system here. So, if I turn on my levels UI, when I go up to this second level, I've got all these rooms up here. I can exit out onto this balcony. I can have battles out here, and they just make for really cool battles when you're fighting from rooftops and balconies and above and below. I show you an example of one of my facades. This is the facade for the church. It's got, in the facade, it's got a automatic teleporter. You just need to code it to the church when you add it to your world. And you can look up in my FAQ and guide how these work as well. This isn't a functional building. It just teleports you to a functional building because the building's so big. I wouldn't want to put it into the scene. And then you can see how some other assets have been, used and linked together. I've got assets from the marketplace deployed. You can see how these are configured for the awnings, for example. You can see the settings for how you would set up an awning configuration. Just stuff to help you guys sort of see how you can build, and then, to really kind of dig into these, what exactly is available to you. Here's some more of the castle assets bolted into the same scene to create something new and unique. You guys have seen this scene, possibly if you've seen my recent videos with Pyrum, but this scene is one that I built also with some of these components. And it's just got some good stuff in here that might be helpful to you. Especially, you'll later this week, you will see a tutorial on how I made some of these automatic teleporters work. You can see I've got some of them in here. You can see that I've got this sort of using Monk's Active Tiles to, instead of using Hey Wait, create my own custom one. So I put that in here so you can see how that's configured. We'll see if I can get this quick encounter into here. I hope I can. I probably need Zephyr's help, but if you don't see it in this release, you'll see it in the next one. I did want to show you this really quickly. This is from Ripper. He built this really cool 3D viewer. So if you're working with levels, it shows you what this scene really looks like in 3 dimensions. You can see my 3-story warehouse. This is sort of a 1 and then 2-story tavern and inn. You can see the magic shop over here. So I just find this really cool. I plan on using this with some of my games to actually show players sort of tactically what they're really evaluating when they're looking at a particular map. It might help them sort of visualize it first and then kind of jump into the map and navigate it from there. Also in the city release is just some other things that help you either serve instantly as maps that you might want to use, or you can just see how I've designed things using the system so that you can build your own. So here I'm walking into this big sort of government building, right? And this is where I'm using that grand hall that you saw earlier. It's certainly a great place to do battles, but I built this little staircase where above the grand hall are some offices. And, through the offices, there's this sort of, big dusty office where somebody important is working. And I can come down here and I can see, one of those big those nice meeting rooms that I had earlier. And then just another space that's nice and big in case I'm trying to do an encounter. Right? So I call this like a government building. And then over on this side, I've got some more of the pieces that you've seen just put together in different ways. I can go in here and, this is the tavern. And in the tavern, there's a sort of a back stair where I could have this patrolled by guards. Outside, I've got a balcony on this level. And, I've got a meeting room where somebody's being held hostage. And then I can go upstairs to this level and I've got more sort of things I can do, right? So this is where somebody's living, maybe whoever owns this establishment and his henchmen. And then outside, there's another balcony that's even higher up that maybe is accessible by a rogue or something like that. And I'm looking down into this sort of, dead sort of garden area. There's some ambient sounds. I can walk underneath these and sort of hide underneath these branches. And anyway, that's just another example of how things can be deployed. Here's an example of just a neighborhood where this is a large neighborhood where all of these different buildings have different setups. You can see if I show you Ripper's module here, you can see sort of dimensions. Everything's kind of at this sort of similar dimension, except this tavern over here in the corner goes up 3 stories. You can see that not all of these buildings are real. Only these have actual buildings that you can enter. And this is just to cut down on performance. Like I could make all of these buildings something that somebody could walk into, but why would you do that? Just for performance reasons, you probably wouldn't want to. And so the rest of these are just roofs. They're just faux buildings, right? And they're set up with the roofs module and they're surrounded by terrain walls. And it's just a way to show you how you can build these kind of big neighborhoods that your players can go and visit different things, right? Like there's a wine shop, there's a restaurant, there's this home with this sort of magic shop bolted into it. There's another home over here. You've got this sort of little dive tavern over there, and then you've got more of an inn kind of thing going on this side over here. And it just to give you inspiration on how you might set things up. Now, if I was going to have a battle here, it'd be really cool. I could have players and enemies going across catwalks, going underneath them, climbing up in certain areas. I have ladders deployed with automatic staircases that take them up to the right level. You know, maybe somebody works their way across this flag line and ultimately battles their way up to the top story of this facility over here. So things like that is what I would do with a map like this to give my players like a lot of really cool, awesome maneuverability. And it's such a big map that even your archers and your long range players will be able to use some of their advantages in here. And finally, I show a plaza. This is just another way to just show you how things can work together. This one happens to use my library assets to be able to run around. You can create hotspots with active tiles to be able to actually browse shelves and things like that. This is a faux building next to a theater, just kind of a small theater. These are also faux buildings. And then over here is the cartographer guild, and then another kind of faux building in the middle. And then of course you've got your stuff in the middle there. This was built really relatively quickly with all these different pieces. And again, just to give you guys some inspiration on kind of what you can throw together from a battle map perspective. Here's an example of all of those pieces, those in the whole system really, but creating a custom on the fly wilderness map, right? So you're looking at these tree line assets that I've used. You're looking at these, these different tiles that are, grown and shrunk in different ways. I even added some of the, fences. I added, here's that river that you saw, and then I put some bridge pieces over it. And then ultimately even dropped in some of these arrow towers over here. So this would make a really cool and fun sort of fight your way through the defenses kind of map. But this is just an example of how you can use these things. I'm going to show you later this week a tutorial on something that Flamewave, I think is what he goes by on Discord. But he did something really cool where I can take a map like this and I can render the background. I can hide tiles that I don't want to render. And this is being able to hide animated tiles, which is cool. Which you usually don't want to render an animated tile. I want to do the entire canvas instead of just selected tiles, and I just want to do floor tiles. And I want to turn it into a JPEG or a PNG or a WebP. If I was on Chrome, I could show you the WebP. But this is super cool because what it does is it'll take all of the images that make up this background, all these different tiles, and it'll combine them into a single tile, make it a WebP tile that I can even shrink down really small. And then it'll delete all the tiles that made that happen and just leave the ones like the overhead tiles where they're at. And it'll even prompt you to generate a complete copy of this scene, but using the new optimized combined tiles. This is for those of you who have players that have maybe really kind of low-end machines and you want to try to optimize them for performance, but you're making a big scene. You can use this DF Architect module to be able to do this stuff. And it's really, really handy and really cool. I won't automatically optimize scenes in my releases because I want you guys to be able to take stuff out and rearrange them and do what you want. But this is a tool that I will give you a tutorial on that will help you sort of optimize things that you build as you go. Another part of this release are these wilderness maps, these sort of generic wilderness maps. And if I do wilderness map, I see I have 14 by 14, 24 by 24, and then 34 by 34. So this is a 34 by 34 map. So what's so special about it? Well, this is really just a tile sitting on top of a generic piece of grass. And I can take this tile and I can double click it, go into its folder, and I can really quickly change this to, a fork in the road. And they're all the same dimension, so it makes it easy to do that. And, maybe I want this fork in the road, but maybe I want to mix multiple together. So I can decrease this in size. I can make a copy of it. And I can paste that copy to the same scene. Oops. And this copy, maybe I want to change to, like this, this plateau. And this plateau, maybe I want to make that quite a bit smaller. And so this just gives you sort of the starting tools to start to make a terrain out of, you know, a particular map. And of course, you know, I can put this over here and I sort of have a path leading up to that. And then, you know, I can come in here and I can, well, I can just drop a tree line in. I can drop other trees. You know, I've got rocks, I've got all sorts of stuff that I can just sort of pop into this scene. And then of course you've got Molinet and you've got all the Forgotten Adventures stuff. So you could put a crypt or a tomb up here using Tom Kartos or that kind of thing. But look, I've just really quickly created this sort of dynamic scene that, I mean, it took me 2 seconds while talking to kind of do this. So you can make some really cool stuff if you've got a little bit of prep time. And that's what these new wilderness things are for, is to be able to just do that quickly. And last but not least, here's another example of some of the wilderness assets combined with some of the other modular city assets to create what is essentially a fort kind of built into the mountain, right? There's a cave in the back. There's a trap sort of protecting that cave that you can use or not. There's an arrow tower that your players can climb up into. There's, you know, there's living quarters. There's an armory. This is Abominable Rob's armory. There's this plateau that that they can battle from. There's even an outhouse that you can go into. Tents. All of this stuff's kind of working things that you know, your players will have fun with. And of course, they can then get up on top of these walls and either defend it or maybe they're attacking it. Got some of the new deployments of the wall assets. So you guys will have a ton of fun with these things. You know, just being able to, you know, put mountains into your scenes really easily, right? This is just a really quick, really easy way to layer in just a mountain and all of a sudden give yourself that sort of tactical kind of interesting things, putting enemies up in the mountaintops and things like that. This is all stuff that you can just throw together. So hopefully you guys enjoy this release. I certainly have already started making some cool stuff for my games with it. And if you guys have more ideas on how this can be improved, other assets that should be added to it, by all means, you know, let me know anytime, and let's go have fun making our maps.